Hello, everyone. While we're waiting until everything appears, my slides and all that, I can actually start already talking. My name is Valeriy. I represent 1KX, and I think that we are an advanced user of SAFE. And, well, basically, our advanced usage goes to the level when we basically need to automate things. And you know what? Doing this in an automated manner is quite a challenge. Doing it securely is quite a challenge. I can talk even without the slides, but hope we'll get them soon. Meanwhile, so in the morning, I think Jörg asked how many people use SAFE here. Now I have another question. How many people here read the source code of SAFE? Wow, quite many people. Nice. Now, how many people have written the source code of SAFE? And is it the same people now? Okay, the SAFE team. Not too many hands. The SAFE team isn't here. Okay, but in any case, thank you very much for doing that. We owe you. Okay, it's up. And all my previous talk was like in this introductory slide. Because we have such a group that we have quite many people who have actually read the source code of SAFE. That means that in the next 15 minutes, we can together design a very secure way of automating your actions with SAFE. And you will help me with this, hopefully. But before we get into the details of designing in this, I want to draw attention to this primary aspect of software design when you do those things. And you know about paranoia. Let's talk about anxiety, for example. Did you know that people who have anxiety have a higher chance of survival in the various cataclysms? And it's like, it feels bad, it's bad life quality, but at the end of the day, you survive better. Likewise, with security, a little bit of paranoia means that things are not very comfortable, things are not great from the usability standpoint. There's always this trade-off. But at the end of the day, when you have a security incident, you better be paranoid. And that's kind of the one dimension of the design that we have to keep in mind. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's just assume we have this basic SAFE. And in that SAFE, we have our assets. And we, just for the sake of an example, we have just two signers, just two people, two humans, who can sign something. Like, hopefully they use some hardware wallets. Nothing unusual, you've all seen that. And now we have this guy, this little guy there, our automation, our bot. And what does this guy have to do? And it's a little bit contradictory. Isn't that guy a little bit too privileged, in your opinion? What do you think? So, like, if I'm the owner, I need to ask for another person to wait for the signature, but this guy doesn't have to do it. That's not great. So he needs to be a little bit more privileged. We need to solve the problem of allowance for that guy. But on the other hand, like, we need to restrict the guy as well. So it's kind of contradictory. It must be more privileged and less privileged at the same time. How do we do this? And by the way, SAFE has modular architecture. Many solutions are possible. What we're suggesting here is by no means the best and the only possible way. And the roadmap for SAFE includes even more mechanisms for that. But like, let's say you just have a very, very basic SAFE as of today, nothing fancy. What would you do? What would you guys give this guy? Any ideas? Yes, please. Same transaction and signed. And then sign. I didn't hear that. Okay. So whenever the transaction is supposed to be sent, it will be sent through the SAFE. So the idea is that the bot already has the signed transaction, and then Safe somehow uses that to basically propagate it further. But actually, the bot needs to. There is a verification. Now, the people who read the source code of Safe know that there is a verification of signatures in any case. So the way we do this, let's also give them two keys. If we give two keys to each of the human owners, and then the bot has two keys as well, then this automation can do anything. Now that's allowance. Now we've allowed this guy to do whatever this guy wants to do. What next? How do we restrict this? And again, I'm asking people who know the safe architecture to come up with an idea. Yes, please, again.
They were actually signed transactions, so this already specified what needs to be executed. What is if we just add a signature, get it executed? So it's already restricted in what it can do.
Okay, so the solution is to use partially signed transactions and have the bot sign add another signature. But how would that prevent this guy to do what he's not supposed to do? Yes, please. Module? Yeah, we'll get to the modules, but modules generally allow things. They don't deny things. I mean, generally, maybe you... Oh, I heard the word that I wanted to hear. That's this guy, guard. So what he'll do is he'll basically look at all the transactions and shoot them the ones that he doesn't like. Now, the question is, then, how we will design all this? How, and by the way, remember this. Remember the paranoia we talked about? Oops. Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of a technical slide, but I mean, bear with me, it's not very complicated. So we have the safe contract on the left side. This is something that we didn't try. This is the code that the safe team has provided. And, being paranoid, we don't want to change anything, like we don't want to touch anything. The number of eyeball hours that have been spent looking at this code is really, really big, and we cannot afford to spend the same number of eyeball hours on this code. So we write only the transaction guard. And yes, the transaction guard will basically make sure that this bot, this automation is restricted, that it's only allowed to do what's needed. What can go wrong? What's the problem in this architecture? Who spots what can go wrong? Yes, please. You could break it. Yeah, so what could go wrong is if this transaction guard has a bug, then you can lock yourself out of your safe because it will stop allowing any transactions and not just the ones from the automation. So this is the reason why we decided, let's be very conservative, especially if we upgrade things in the future. Let's separate it into two contracts. Let's just have a very basic, simple guard that we can look through, verify multiple times, and that only really makes sure not to ever lock the owners out of the safe. And then just call something else, which is the condition checker, which basically looks in detail in the transaction. And, even if that condition checker reverts, even if it misbehaves totally, the only thing that you can sure about is that it will never lock yourself out of the safe. But there's more stuff can go wrong here. Yes, please.
Your card safe relies on multiple guard.
Yes, so there is only one transaction guard. And for now, the use case that we use it for, the use cases are such that it's enough. Like if you introduce more complexity with multiple guards calling each other, it's certainly possible. You can just inside this transaction guard, you can call another contract and so on, and make it all configurable and make it so complicated that my paranoia will not let sleep at night. So this is where it all can go. But yeah, that's a fair point. So one other thing that can go wrong is like, okay, when you, for some reason, decide to reconfigure things and change transaction guards in that safe, you can also, under some circumstances, lock yourself out of the safe. So what we do there, we basically take this opportunity of transaction guards to also have these post conditions and make sure that whenever changes happen to the configuration of this whole system, that we actually verify, okay, do we have enough of unrestricted signers there that actually can salvage? And if there are not enough unrestricted signers, then we just say, you know what, like whatever you're trying to do, let's not do this, please. So it's very simple. It works. And it's certainly not the only way to do this. But I want to talk about something else. How much does this cost? Because there's always some cost. This is the cost of paranoia, including guards, including extra keys, and so on. And we spoke about, like, we discussed two things. One is latency, the other is gas cost. So let's talk about latency. So when we are speaking about something like Ethereum with 12-second blocks, or Gnosis Chain with 5-second, it might not matter. MEV stuff kind of makes decision on somewhat different criteria, but even then, sometimes you would want those things to be fast. But when we're talking about things like new L2s with sub-second latencies and with sequencers that essentially a very simple FIFO sequencers, then we actually do care about that. It depending on the use case, it might be relevant. And the question is like, okay, you need to produce more signatures, which is more CPU work. Then you get a longer call with more call data, more to transfer. Then, it must cost something in terms of latency. And the hypothesis is actually that shouldn't matter on relatively modern hardware. So we did a benchmark in Rust that actually calls safe, that reproduces the most aggressive environment where latencies are very low. We just use this development server Anvil from Foundry that is super fast. So, it's the environment in which every millisecond of latency matters. And this is like they call them, the statisticians call them violent charts. I would rather call them, I don't know, stingray charts. And you can see that those stingrays are almost the same. So the blue one for safe, you can see the white dot there is actually the median. And those medians are roughly around 5 milliseconds. So they almost don't differ. I didn't do like the full proper statistical test, like student test. I think we can do it still, but I think we can see just from the picture that the distributions are such that it almost doesn't matter. So if you want to do it in some sort of high frequency situation through safe, you are fine, like really fine. Then there is another angle, and that angle is gas cost. And all of this machinery, depending on how many signers you want, takes different amount of gas. And in this case, in this benchmark, what the safe does, the transaction itself takes about 100K gas. It's a simple swap on Uniswap that is done by safe. Naturally, your transaction may be much bigger, cost you more gas. To start with, then the difference will not be that noticeable, but you need to pay attention. Yes, for example, on Ethereum, it costs something. On other chains, probably less important. We could probably also optimize, spend some time optimizing it. All of these gas optimization things can still be worked on, but this is something to keep in mind. I expect that with the roadmap of safe, there'll be other solutions that are actually costing us less in terms of paranoia reduction, that will also be more gas efficient, but we'll have to see. And this is what I want to talk about. Like, why do we do it this way? Because it might seem weird for all the people in the audience who read the source code and who read the new white paper, that like, why are you doing this way? Okay, let's start with MPC. Well, we're discussing on-chain wallets here at SafeCon, so let's not talk about MPC. It's complementary. And then if we talk about latency, you can imagine passing around your signature to get those other signatures is definitely going to be worse. 4337. Okay, so the technical slide was complicated enough. Now imagine if I have this slide with the bundler and all the in between and the separate mempool, and then think about latency and think about complexity. Complexity is what I care most, really. Like, if you want to do something securely, complexity is really your enemy. So, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's the future, maybe not. We don't know. We need to do things now, so we do it the way we do it. Let's see in the future. And then modules and plugins. So speaking of modules, that's where the paranoia comes in, because I think that writing a guard and making sure that you not lock yourself out is a little bit easier than writing a module and making sure that you never made any mistake that would allow somebody to hack and you would just give access to the hacker or to everybody else. So this is basically a choice not based on like the architecture, but based on those questions of how settled the code base is, how many changes we do, where do we take responsibility, where we don't take responsibility, and so on. That's it. I'm open for questions. Yes, please. It's a microphone. You have a mic behind you. Yep.
In this architecture, we suggested that we use...
Can you speak?
Yeah. In this architecture, we talked about we use a bot that handles it. But doesn't it make less pluggable with the ecosystem once the account abstraction thing kicks in? What I mean by it is, if you use account abstraction, you can send the transactions through a transaction bundle, and it still is in some way pluggable to the ecosystem. But with the other route, it becomes less and less pluggable with the time.
So to comment that, Safe is account abstraction. So it's not like account abstraction is coming. It is there.
The way you are sending the transaction from users and to the bot or the bundler.
You're speaking in the context of ERC 4337, right? The bundler. Yes, I mean, we'll definitely look when things are more mature in this area, and we'll, there are many possibilities. Please, there's the next question.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I have a kind of a high-level question. So from my perspective...
Okay, basically, the question is, if you're putting the guard on-chain, why exactly are you doing this? So, like from the cryptographic point of view, you have some entities, and they are represented in cryptography with their private keys. So if you want to guard the private keys, basically you are just augmenting the logic of key management and key access. And as long as it's your personal business, why does it have to be on chain? Why do you have to pay gas costs, etc.? Why is it just your private server doing these things?
So first of all, we are not putting keys on chain in any way, right?
So not keys, but the logic of the guard.
Logic. Yeah, I think this is a very good question. I think it's just the whole debate between whether you go on chain or whether you go for MPC in these cases. On chain is permissionless, distributed. It leaves a trace, and in some cases you don't want that. Then you cannot use it. When you want the whole process to leave a trace, then you actually want to use the on-chain solution. So, I mean, there's definitely cases where you want to hide this and not have it on chain, but we're talking here about the case where we already use Safe, and we already have funds, and we already want to do some actions with them, and we already want to automate them. And then the question, how do we manage the keys for this automation, is not even touched here, because we assume that they appear somehow, and that's a separate big topic, and maybe one day we'll talk about this as well. One more.
So just curious, very easy question. What are the automations that 1KX is doing with
that I cannot tell, sorry.
Secret.
Yes. But you can assume that we are, as in the beginning I said, like we are a big user of Safe, and we just have to do a lot of things. And because of that, like doing it only with, sticking some hardware wallet all the time is just not feasible.